Part 41. The Prince Longs for Me Every Night After Mastering Thought Reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 401. Shen Chuwei shook his head guiltily. No one said anything to me. Xiao Jinyan frowned, feeling that Xiaju was hiding something from him. Then why did you suddenly ask me this question? Shen Chuwei lowered his head and looked at the snowball in his arms. When he was confused, Lu 11 bowed and walked in. Your Highness, Mr. Lu would like to see you. Xiao Jinyan nodded and looked at Shen Chuwei, looking at her as if she was hesitant to speak. I will go take care of things first and come back later. Shen Chu nodded slightly. Xiao Jinyan stood up, glanced at Shen Chuwei, and then left. It wasn't until Xiao Jinyan's figure disappeared from the door that Shen Chuwei looked away and looked down at the snowball in his arms. Thinking of the portraits and jade in the dark room, her delicate brows wrinkled. She rubbed Xue Tuan's furry head, who was Feng Wu. Xue Tuan raised his head, staring at Shen Chuwei with his azure eyes without blinking, and scratched her hand twice with his little paws. Shen Chuwei saw Xue Tuan scratching himself, and thought Xue Tuan's paws were itchy. When he grabbed Xue Tuan's paws, he saw pink and tender flesh pads hidden in the snow-white hair. Swichuan, your meat pads are so pink and tender. Miao Xue Tuan put his other paw on Shen Chuwei's right hand and patted it a few times, as if he was in a hurry. Shen Chuwei looked at it in confusion. What's wrong? Are you hungry? She took the ham sausage out of the space and tore open the packaging. When Xue Tuan saw the ham sausage with an originally irritable expression, his eyes glowed green. He opened his mouth and bit into the ham sausage to eat. Princess. Concubine Su walked in cheerfully, waving her handkerchief. Shen Chuwei saw Concubine Su coming and asked Concubine Su if she knew about Feng Wu. Concubine Su sat down on the couch and glanced at the crib. The little ones are all asleep. Well, I fell asleep right after I came back from Sinning Palace. Shen Chuwei approached her curiously and asked her with a mysterious face, do you know who Feng Wu is? Concubine Su was stunned for a while when she heard this, because the person the man in black was looking for was Feng Wu, whose nickname was Xiaju. Why do you ask this suddenly? I'm just curious about who this person is. Do you know? Shen Chuwei looked at Concubine Su expectantly, hoping to learn about Feng Wu from her mouth. Concubine Su was a little embarrassed. Although she and Shen Chuwei were good sisters, the man in black did not allow her to tell others. If she did, she would lose credibility. If I don't say it, I feel sorry for my little sister. Concubine Su did not expect that she would also encounter the dilemma in the storybook. How do you know Feng Wu? Shen Chuwei held her chin in her hands. I found out by accident, and now I'm just curious about who she is. Concubine Su was extremely surprised. Apart from Shen Chuwei being interested in eating, drinking, and sleeping, she had never seen her so curious about anything. I'll help you inquire. To inquire is to wait for the man in black to come and ask the man in black. If he seeks Feng Wu, he will definitely know who she is. Shen Chu nodded slightly. After Concubine Su left, Shen Chuwei sat in front of the small bed and looked at the sleeping babies. In fact, Xiao Jinyan said, to be honest, it was nothing. Who didn't have a childhood sweetheart who played very well when they were young? But he lied. There are Feng Wu's portraits and birthday gifts in the study. If you hadn't played so well and had a good relationship, would you have kept these things? Xiao Jinyan actually said no. Shen Chuwei was a little depressed. During dinner, Xiao Jinyan came back from outside. The maids put the food on the table one by one. Xiao Jinyan came to the table and sat down, picked up her chopsticks, and slowly picked up the dishes. Seeing that Shen Chuwei didn't move his chopsticks, she was the most active in eating. Stop looking, let's eat. Shen Chuwei picked up the chopsticks to pick up the food, looked at the table full of food, and thought to herself that she would be full first. At the dinner table, Xiao Jinyan always spoke very little. After eating a whole meal, I could only say 2 sentences. After bathing, Xiao Jinyan planned to have a good chat with Xiaju. If he hadn't heard her thinking about some random things, he might not have cared about such a question. Tell me, what happened today? Shen Chu sat on the bed with his legs crossed slightly, looking at Xiao Jinyan with a serious face in front of him. You were obviously the one who lied, but you still acted like I'm right. I am just curious. Xiao Jinyan stretched out his long arms and pulled her into his arms. Don't think about the things that are there and not in the future. Is there any other woman around me? Shen Chuwei thought about it carefully. She had never paid attention to Xiao Jinyan's daily life since she came here. Later she learned that although there were many women around Xiao Jinyan, he had not touched any of them. However, the things in the dark space are also real. Why doesn't Xiao Jinyan admit it? The more Shen Chuwei thought about it, the more he felt that the secret in the dark room must be very important to Xiao Jinyan. Just like her, all the delicious food is put into the space. Shen Chuwei didn't mention the things in the secret room to her face because she felt guilty, and peeking into other people's secrets was a bad behavior in itself. She was too curious to hold back. Ever since he got drunk last night, the man in black disappeared and never appeared again. Concubine Su was sitting in front of the windowsill. It was a sweltering summer. She was shaking a fan in one hand, looking at the dark night, with the sound of wind and insects in her ears. This wait lasted 2 months. In the past 2 months, Chang Liangyuan went to Sining Palace very diligently, reading scriptures to the Queen Mother and beating her legs. These were what Wan Xian did on a daily basis, but after Chang Liangyuan came and went, Wan Xian became free. Wan Xian looked at Chang Liangyuan, who was beating the Queen Mother's legs, and humbly asked for advice. Sister Chang is very skilled in her skills. I should learn more. Miss Wangzhen, you deserve the award. Chang Liangyuan smiled slightly. Want to argue with me? Are you worthy? The Queen Mother looked at Chang Liangyuan and Wan Xian in front of her and was very happy. The AI family are half dead. With you by my side, my mood gets better every day. Chang Liangyuan was the first to say, I am lucky to be able to serve in front of Grandma Huang. Grandma Huang loved me the most when I was a child. Wan Xian came over with the hibiscus cake prepared in advance and offered it with both hands. Your Majesty, these are the snacks I prepared. You can try them. When the Queen Mother saw the hibiscus cake, she picked up a piece and praised it without hesitation. Wan Xian is clever and handy, and the hibiscus cake is even more delicious than the ones made in the imperial kitchen. Wan Xian smiled and said, the Queen Mother likes to eat, and Wan Xian is happy. The Queen Mother was eating hibiscus cake. She was too old to eat anything too sweet, so the hibiscus cake made by Wan Xian was just right. You are so virtuous. The AI family is a little reluctant to let you get married, but the AI family promised to find you a good husband, so they can't bear to let you get married. Wan Xian took the Queen Mother's hand and said reluctantly, Queen Mother, Wan Xian wants to serve you by your side for the rest of her life. You kid, what are you talking about? The Queen Mother said this, but she was very happy in her heart. After hearing this, Chang Liangyuan had a bad feeling in her heart. If the Queen Mother pointed out Wan Xian to His Highness, wouldn't that mean there was one more person competing for favor? Grandma Huang, I remember that you like to eat jujube paste cakes the most. I will make some for you to try tomorrow. The Queen Mother nodded happily. Okay, I haven't eaten for a long time and I just want to try it. Chang Liangyuan lowered her eyes full of calculations. The next day, Chang Liangyuan came to Sining Palace with a carefully made jujube paste cake. Grandma Huang, I brought some jujube paste cakes. Chang Liangyuan stepped forward happily, but the sole of her foot slipped, her center of gravity became unstable, and she fell directly to the ground. The jujube cakes in her hand also fell to the ground. It was dirty and could not be eaten. Wan Xian stepped forward to help Chang Liangyuan and asked worriedly, Sister Chang, are you okay? The Queen Mother was also startled. Girl Lanur, how are you? Grandma Huang, I'm fine. It's just a pity that the cake is made from jujube. Chang Liangyuan endured the pain in her butt and looked at the cake on the ground. She was so angry that she couldn't help but wonder why the ground was so slippery. The Queen Mother breathed a sigh of relief. As long as everything is fine, it will be the same next time. At this time, the palace maid walked in with small steps and said, Miss Wangzhen, the jujube paste cake you made is ready. The Queen Mother was a little surprised. Wangzhen, you also made jujube paste cake. Hearing this, Chang Liangyuan raised her head and looked at Wan Xian, questioning in her tone, why does Miss Wan Xian want jujube cake? Yesterday, I heard from Sister Chang that the Queen Mother likes to eat jujube paste cakes. I learned to make it when I had nothing to do. I tried several times but was not satisfied. I don't know if it will work this time. The Queen Mother's greed was already aroused, and she couldn't wait to say, bring it over and let the AI family have a taste. Wan Xian responded and took the jujube paste cake. Queen Mother, please try it. Chang Liangyuan took a look at the jujube paste cake, which was no worse than the one she made. When she saw the Queen Mother eating it, she even praised Wan Xian for making it delicious. Looking at Wan Xian's proud and innocent look, he didn't expect that he was so scheming and deliberately embarrassed her. The baby is 6 months old, and although she still can't crawl properly, her body coordination is very good and she can move her body and go where she wants to go. The summer is sultry, and there is a mat on the couch, which makes it easier for the two babies to rummage around for new things. Snowballs and round balls have become the two children's main toys. Xue Tuan was lying on the couch, with his head pressed very low. Swichuan's head was resting on his pillow, and his little hands were playing with its plush ears. Swichuan Sheng stared at Dao Tao helplessly, because Dao Tao was pulling on those snow-white beards with a serious look on his face, showing his sharp teeth from time to time. Yuan Gun Gun, who had been tortured so much, hid under the low table and looked at Xue Tuan with sympathy. Brother, if you keep persisting, you will be liberated when the little ancestors fall asleep. Swichuan. Shen Chuwei lay on the bed and took a nap. She rarely dreamed, but she had a long dream. In the dream, she turned into a 5-year-old child, running non-stop with 2 short legs. It felt like the corridor was endless, and she was panting from exhaustion. As the scene changed, she suddenly grew up and became much taller, but she was still running, and the corridor in front of her was still very long. There was a slender figure standing at the end of the corridor, and she tried her best to catch up with him. Brother Jinyan, wait for me. Shen Chu opened her eyes slightly and looked into a pair of dark phoenix eyes, which made her stunned for a moment. Xiao Jinyan took out a square handkerchief from her sleeve pocket and wiped the cold sweat on her forehead. Did you have a nightmare? You actually called me Brother Jinyan. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 402. Shen Chuwei woke up from the dream, and for a moment she couldn't tell whether it was a dream or reality. She just looked at Xiao Jinyan with her starry eyes, and her mind was still recalling the dream she had just had. Xiao Jinyan saw that she was just staring at him, but didn't say a word, and couldn't help but worry. What's wrong? Is the dream scary? So scared. Shen Chuwei shook her head, then sat up from the couch and looked at Xiao Jinyan in confusion. Did I really call Jinyan brother? Xiao Jinyan nodded. Well, I am your husband. Why did you call me brother in the dream? I don't know why I call you brother. Brother is obviously something that only children would call, that Feng Guiu would call Xiao Jinyan brother. Thinking of Feng Guiu, she asked Chengzi. Chengzi had been in the palace since childhood, and had never heard of Feng Guiu. Xiao Jinyan said, but you did call me just now. I don't hate it. Shen Chuwei pouted. You don't hate it, that Feng Guiu called you Jinyan brother. Xiao Jinyan was a little curious. What did you dream about? She was running throughout the dream, and she was even more tired after waking up. Shen Shuwei was a little listless. She thought carefully and said, "In the dream, I was running all the time, from the age of 5 to 10, as if I was chasing someone." Xiao Jinyan asked, "Are you chasing me?" Shen Shuwei wanted to say, "Prince, you are so narcissistic. How could your highness think that I was chasing you? You called me in the dream, weren't you calling me because you were chasing me?" Xiao Jinyan said as a matter of course. Shen Shuwei chuckled, "There was indeed a high-spirited young man in the dream, but I don't know if it was your highness." Xiao Jinyan's smile froze, looking at her smug look. He knew nothing about Xiaoju's past. He knew nothing about her family and friends. She never talked about it either. Xiao Jinyan didn't want his wife to dream about men other than himself. "Didn't you see his face clearly in your dream?" Shen Shuwei shook her head, then smiled and praised, "I only saw the boy's back, but I can tell from his back that he is very handsome and has a noble temperament." Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei stared at Xiao Jinyan for a long time, then suddenly came over, hugged his arm, and asked curiously, "Your Highness, has anyone called you Brother Jinyan before?" Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes, "I don't remember." Shen Shuwei frowned, she let go of Xiao Jinyan's arm, lying again. Xiaoju's expression was almost written on her face, unhappy. "How could I let others call Brother Jinyan such an intimate name?" Originally, she believed every word of Xiao Jinyan, but now, she began to doubt. "Feng Wu not only called him, but you also entered the painting together. Although it is a simple drawing, it is hard to tell who is who, but it is also a portrait of the two." At this moment, Shen Shuwei didn't know that she was jealous. A voice of "Mom" attracted all of Shen Shuwei's attention. She looked down and saw her daughter raising her little head and looking at her with a smile. The pronunciation of "Mom" was a little inaccurate, and the "mom" at the end was very soft. She often taught her son and daughter "Mom" and "Dad." She happily picked up her daughter, "Susu, you can call me Mom." Xiao Jinyan asked in confusion, "What does Mom mean?" Shen Shuwei happily explained, "It means mother, mother." Hearing this, Xiao Jinyan looked down at his son, picked him up, and coaxed him, "Dao Tao, call me father." Dao Tao opened her mouth and said in a baby voice, "Mom." Xiao Jinyan repeated again, "Call me father." Susu called in a baby voice, "Daddy." Dao Tao was unwilling to be left behind, "Daddy." Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei saw Xiao Jinyan's confused look and couldn't help laughing. Daddy means dad, and also means father. They are still very young and can only make syllables like mom and dad. Father is too difficult and they can't make this sound for the time being. I see Xiao Jinyan was also happy to call daddy, his son and daughter could call daddy and mommy. Xiao Jinyan played with the babies for a while and then went to the study. He sat at the desk and looked at the memorials. Thinking of Xiaoju calling him Brother Jinyan, he put down the memorials in his hand, stood up and walked to the bookshelf, pressed the glass lamp, and the secret compartment opened. This secret compartment had not been opened for a long time. He took out the things inside, a painting and a piece of extremely precious jade. These two things were found in his package when he woke up. Because of a painting and a piece of jade, he also spent time and energy to check, but found nothing. He also tried many methods, but failed to restore his memory. Later, because there was no result, he started from scratch after returning to Daxia. He was very busy every day, so he gave up temporarily. Later, after becoming the prince and meeting Xiaoju, he gave up. If I guessed correctly, the person in the painting is Feng Wu. The eyebrows and eyes of the person in the painting are somewhat similar to Shen Shuwei. When he first met Shen Shuwei, she had just entered the East Palace and was not heavily made up. He was still very surprised by the similar eyebrows and eyes. After several attempts, he knew that Shen Shuwei and Feng Wu just looked a little similar. It was not until Shen Shui's personality changed drastically that he noticed her again. Looking at the painting and jade in his hand, he had always wanted to recover his memory and wanted to know the origins of these two things and the people in the painting. Xiao Jinyan put these two things back into the dark room. He already had Xiaoju, and he was no longer as persistent in these memories as before. He pressed the glass cup and the secret compartment closed again. Returning to the desk, he continued to review the memorial. Shen Shui was eating watermelon, and there were two babies beside him who were eager to see it. They kept using their little hands to pull Shen Shui's sleeves. The little mouth opened, ah, ah. It looks like a little bird waiting to be fed, with its mouth open, waiting to be fed. They didn't even play with the usually beloved snowball. How could Shen Shui be willing to let the babies down? She scooped some watermelon juice with a small spoon and looked at the two mouths waiting for food, starting with her sister, a snack food. As soon as the spoon came close, Susu grabbed the handle of the spoon and drank the watermelon juice eagerly. After drinking the watermelon juice from the spoon, Susu was unwilling to let go and kept sucking on the spoon. Because watermelon juice is sweet, the spoon dipped in watermelon seeds is also sweet. Okay, no more. Shen Shui used some strength to withdraw the spoon, scooped up a little watermelon juice and handed it to her brother's mouth. Babies are always virtuous. As soon as they reached over, Dao Tao grabbed the handle of the spoon, and then drank the watermelon juice with peace of mind. Over and over again, with both mouths waiting for her to feed, Shen Shui didn't even take a bite of watermelon. When the queen came in, she saw Shen Shui feeding the babies watermelon. She stared at the two little guys curiously. She thought the babies could only drink milk, but now she saw them eating watermelon, which was so cute. Two snackers, is the watermelon delicious? Usually when they see Grandma Huan coming, the brother and sister will be very excited and reach out for a hug. Today, the two little guys are staring at the spoon in Shen Shui's hand, already addicted to eating watermelon. The queen couldn't help laughing. Can the baby eat watermelon? Shen Shu said softly, Mother, it's okay to drink some watermelon juice. That's good. The queen looked at the two little guys grabbing the spoons to eat the watermelon juice, and wanted to try it. Princess, the babies are so cute, let me feed them too. Shen Shui didn't get what she wanted. Just because she was feeding the two little guys, she couldn't eat watermelon. After giving the spoon to the queen, she picked up another large spoon, scooped up a large piece and ate it herself. The queen scooped some watermelon juice with a small spoon and fed it to the baby. She couldn't help but smile when she saw the two little guys eagerly opening their mouths. Xiao Jinyu went to Fenji Palace to look for his mother, but saw no one. When he learned that his mother was in the East Palace, he rushed over without stopping. Mother, sister-in-law. The queen's thoughts were on her grandchildren at the moment, and she was a little surprised to see her son coming. Why are you here? Xiao Jinyu brought a stool for himself and sat down. While watching the queen feed the baby, he said, Of course my son came to the queen because he has something important to discuss with the queen. The queen snorted, What important thing can you do? Xiao Jinyu. Sure enough, after having grandchildren, he forgot about his precious son. I used to praise him, but now I praise my grandchildren. Shen Shui couldn't help but laugh. Xiao Jinyu cleared his throat and said, Mother, my son wants to marry a concubine. The queen stopped feeding the baby, raised her head and looked at her son, and saw that he looked very serious, not like he was joking. Which girl do you like? Shen Shui was eating watermelon, and suddenly thought of Miss Han. She must be the only one who has a very close relationship with Xiao Jingsu. Xiao Jinyu said straight to the point, It's Miss Han. She has been following Er Chen. Er Chen wants to give her a status. The queen had met Miss Han several times. She once thought that her son would like a petite and cuter girl like Shen Shui, but she never expected that he would like someone like Miss Han. Have you thought about it? Xiao Jingsu said very seriously, my son has made up his mind and wants to marry Miss Han as his concubine. It's rare for the queen to see her son so eager to marry a concubine. After going through some things, she respects her son's decision. There is no problem here in this palace. You can marry whoever you want, but I'm afraid your father's side is not so easy to talk to. I will definitely agree if my father loves you so much, Xiao Jinyu said with absolute certainty. The queen said, it's better to agree. Then I'll go find father, Xiao Jinyu said, stood up and left. The queen hurriedly stopped him, why do you suddenly want to marry a concubine? Xiao Jinyu was a little embarrassed to speak. He couldn't tell his mother that he was drunk that day and claimed Miss Han's innocence. The prince's brother already married a concubine when he was as old as me. My son also wants to marry a concubine. The queen nodded in agreement, it's time to marry a concubine and have children, go ahead. Xiao Jinyu went directly to the imperial study room to find his father. When the emperor learned that his son wanted to marry a concubine, he naturally agreed. But when he heard that his son was going to marry a folk woman, he became a little unhappy. What do you think of being a private woman, a concubine? Xiao Jinyu said seriously, Father, I want to marry her as my main concubine, not as a side concubine. The emperor had been having a headache recently, so he had an idea after thinking that he hadn't been to Fenji Palace for a long time. Okay, you go back first, I will discuss it with your mother later. Thank you, Father. Xiao Jinyu was not worried at all. His mother had already agreed, and his father would definitely listen to her. At night, the emperor was busy with the things at hand and planned to go to Fenji Palace after finishing his work. Concubine Su was sitting on the couch, eating watermelon and reading a storybook. This time she was reading ancient poems. Just when I was watching with great interest, a black figure came in quietly. When she got closer, Concubine Su suddenly laughed, I am dying of laughter. The man in black. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 403. Concubine Su's laughter was nothing like that of a lady, her smile was very magical. The man in black initially thought that Concubine Su had noticed his arrival, thinking that she was now more vigilant. Until he saw her staring at the notebook in her hand, she didn't notice his arrival. He looked over with curiosity and saw what was written above. The princess chuckled, is the prince jealous? It smells so sour. Will I be jealous? Don't you know that what I hate the most is the smell of vinegar? The prince secretly lowered his head and smelled it. Where is the smell of vinegar? The man in black couldn't help but smile after reading this passage. This time he was reading a normal script. You have nothing to do every day, so why not read more poetry and cultivate your sentiments? Concubine Su had just taken a big mouthful of watermelon when she suddenly heard a faint voice and was so frightened that she almost choked to death. She patted her chest and looked back behind her, and saw the man in black standing half a meter behind her, with a black scarf on his handsome face as always, only revealing a pair of beautiful phoenix eyes. After not seeing her for 3 months, Concubine Su looked surprised. Where have you been these 3 months? Of course I'm looking for someone. The man in black sat down in front of the round table, picked up the teapot and poured himself a cup of tea, then pulled off his kerchief and drank by himself. His movements were skillful, as if he were at home. This was the second time Concubine Su saw the face of the man in black, and she still felt amazed. Maybe it was because she had always thought that the man in black was a man with average facial features, and the contrast was a bit big, so she felt amazed every time. Why is there no sound at all every time you come here? There is no door, why don't you knock on the window? One day I will be scared to death by you, how wrong will I be? Aren't you fine? The man in black chuckled and took 2 sips of tea. Concubine Sue. The man in black glanced at the notebook in her hand and asked, "Why do you always like to read such notebooks?" When the storybook was mentioned, Concubine Sue subconsciously kept the storybook in her arms. Man in black. Concubine Sue said matter-of-factly, "I'm a girl. Isn't it normal to read this kind of book? As for the poems and songs you mentioned, I'm not interested. There is something the Crown Princess said that makes perfect sense." The man in black asked cooperatively, "What are you talking about?" Concubine Sue said, "The Crown Princess said that if you have time to fight to please others, it is better to please yourself. Eat well and drink well. Not only will your body be good, but your mood will also be good." Man in black. Concubine Sue knew from the reaction of the man in black that he didn't believe it. "Since I put eating and drinking first, I have indeed been a lot happier. If you are not happy, you will criticize others. Anyway, you would rather make others uncomfortable than make yourself wronged." The man in black said calmly, "Then why are you still thinking about leaving the palace?" "The palace is not my home," Concubine Sue said as she took a big mouthful of watermelon. "Seedless watermelon is just delicious." The man in black nodded in agreement with her statement. "No matter how good the palace is, it is not as good as home. But Xiaju has been away from home for more than 7 years, and she has no one to protect her when she is wronged." Concubine Sue thought of Feng Wu, whom Shen Chu had mentioned slightly. Now that the man in black was in front of her, how could she not ask? "I want to ask you something." The man in black raised his eyelids. "Say." Concubine Sue asked, "Your sweetheart Xiaju, if I remember correctly, her name is Feng Wu, right?" The man in black paused while drinking tea. "When did you become my sweetheart?" Concubine Sue curled her lips. "Didn't you say that yourself?" The man in black didn't bother to explain. "Why are you asking these questions? Or do you have relevant information?" The man in black didn't say anything, but Concubine Sue was curious. She held half a watermelon and asked, "Is that true?" The man in black raised his eyebrows. "Does it have anything to do with you?" Concubine Sue said seriously, "Of course it does matter. You have a girlfriend, so we must keep an appropriate distance." The man in black couldn't help laughing when he heard this. Under Concubine Sue's repeated questioning, the man in black became impatient and replied, "You were wearing cool clothes that night when you were drunk, and I happened to see you. So what are your plans?" Mentioning that night, Concubine Sue's face turned red. "That was an accident, it doesn't count." The man in black chuckled and did not continue the topic. "Didn't you say that there is no such person as Xiaoju in the palace? Why did you mention it all of a sudden? I didn't find anyone named Xiaoju. I'm just curious who Feng Wu is. Did she run away from home?" Concubine Sue figured out that the man in black was forcing her to marry, but Feng Wu was unwilling to marry and then ran away from the marriage. Then, the man in black comes out to find his fiancée, so it makes sense easily. The man in black paused after hearing this, then left without saying a word, and never came back again. Was he running away from home? He nodded. Concubine Sue felt that she was extremely smart, and she could guess such complicated things. The melons that are forced are not sweet. The man in black had a question mark on his forehead. Concubine Sue continued to ask, "Who is Feng Wu? Where is he from?" The man in black looked at Concubine Sue suspiciously. "Why are you suddenly so interested in Feng Wu?" Concubine Sue said with a guilty conscience, "I'm just curious about what kind of person you want. The person you are looking for." The man in black rarely said seriously, "What kind of person she is not your concern. If you have any news about her, you can tell me." Suddenly being scolded, Concubine Sue felt a little unhappy. "Why are you so nervous?" "I'm just curious. If you don't want to say it, you don't have to say it." The man in black paused after hearing this, and then chuckled, "Why are you so excited?" Concubine Sue stuffed her mouth with watermelon and said vaguely, "How am I excited? I'm clearly angry." Concubine Sue was a little disappointed that she couldn't ask who Fenghui was. Asterisk. The emperor went to Fenji Palace after dealing with the matters at hand. Fenji Palace was quiet for a long time. The palace maids discussed privately that the queen had angered the emperor. Now seeing the emperor coming, everyone was very happy again. The queen was making clothes for the little ones at this time. Seeing the babies wearing the clothes she made by hand would give her a sense of accomplishment. This is also what she does every day. "Queen, the emperor is here." When Qingying came in to report, the queen had not reacted yet. When she reacted, the emperor had already strode in. She had to put down her needlework and stood up to salute. "Your Majesty, may you live long and be well." The emperor looked at the queen whom he had not seen for a long time. She was still very indifferent to him, and suddenly felt a lot more distant. He glanced at the pile of cloth on the table and asked, "What is the queen busy with?" The queen replied, "Making clothes for the babies." In fact, even if the queen didn't say it, the emperor knew that the queen would make clothes for the babies when she had nothing to do. He didn't know how many clothes she made. It's okay for a grandmother to make clothes for her grandson, but she can't do it every day. How can the queen hold needles and thread all the time? "Why do you make clothes for the babies every day? Let the maids do it." The queen said lightly, "You are idle anyway, why not make a few clothes?" The emperor. "Why don't you come to me when you are free?" The emperor was depressed. He came to the bed and sat down. Looking at the queen standing in front of him, he glanced at the position beside him. "Queen, sit down and talk." The queen responded and sat down on the round stool opposite. When the emperor saw it, he knew that the queen was deliberately avoiding him. When she was angry before, she would sit on the bed nearby. The two didn't talk, and the atmosphere was awkward for a while. This situation had never happened before. Ever since Yechu came back, the queen began to distance herself from him and was very cold to him. "Does the queen know that you wants to marry a concubine?" The queen said, "You mentioned it, and I have no objection, as long as you likes it." The emperor asked again, "Does the queen know that the woman you wants to marry is just a commoner?" "I know, I have met her a few times. Although she is not a good match for you, who makes you like her? Doesn't the emperor agree?" The queen raised her eyes and looked at the emperor, knowing that he valued power, and it was simply a fantasy for a prince to marry a commoner. The emperor didn't expect the queen to have no opinion at all. "You is her precious son, so perfunctory?" "I don't disagree, I just think it's better to marry her as a concubine." The queen had long guessed that the dog emperor would say this. In his eyes, interests always come first. But you likes her and wants to marry her as his principal wife. If the emperor disagrees, you will definitely be sad. The emperor pondered for a moment after hearing this. "I will decide after I meet that civilian woman. I haven't seen her yet, so I can't make a promise casually." The queen nodded and agreed. The matter was resolved, and the queen thought the dog emperor should leave. The emperor spread his arms and ordered, "Queen, help me undress." "Queen." The emperor was a little angry when he saw the queen ignoring him, but he had to endure it, otherwise, like last time, he would leave in anger and the queen would not keep him. "The queen is now increasingly looking down on me, and she can't even order you around." The queen bowed, "I have a cold, and I'm afraid that I will infect the emperor if we are too close. I am doing this for the emperor's good." "Catch a cold? I think you are just making excuses on purpose." "I'm not afraid." "Your Majesty is not afraid, but I am afraid. If your Majesty is not feeling well and delays the government, then I will be guilty of death." The emperor was speechless for a while and stared at the queen for a long time. "Anyway, he would not leave tonight. He took a few steps forward, and just when the queen thought that the dog emperor was angry and wanted to leave, he stopped in front of her, grabbed her belt and pulled it, and the belt was thrown on the ground. After a while, the queen was stunned and realized that the dog emperor was taking off his clothes. She grabbed the dog emperor's hand, but the strength of a woman was not comparable to that of a man, and she couldn't stop him from pulling his belt at all. "What is the dog emperor crazy about today? Your Majesty, what are you doing? If the queen is unwilling to undress me, then I will undress you." The emperor continued to undress the queen with a gloomy face. The queen saw the clothes being thrown on the ground one by the emperor, and finally carried to the bed by the emperor. Did the emperor come to Fenji Palace just for this matter? The queen was so wronged. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 404. Chapter 404. I'm really scared, afraid that Fenghui will snatch His Highness away. The emperor was startled when he heard this. He just came down just thinking about it. Just seeing the queen's resistance, his eyes darkened. Why did the queen reject me over and over again? My concubine said she was unwell, but the emperor didn't believe it. Ever since she knew the truth, she couldn't be the same as before. She always had knots in her heart and didn't want the dog emperor to get close to her. Forget it once or twice. If it happens every time, how can you make me believe it? I think you can't forget that yet, Shu, right? The emperor didn't know how much self-control he had to use to prevent himself from going crazy. The queen knew that the dog emperor was angry. Although she was a little scared, she still frowned and said, "Didn't the emperor say that he understands his concubines? Now he doesn't understand them anymore." The emperor sat down on the bed and looked at the candlelight on the bedside. It was as bright as the candlelight on the day he married the queen, but they were not as loving as before. "We have been husband and wife for more than 20 years, and I think I know you very well, but what you have done makes me very confused. Why have you been so lukewarm to me since you came back from Fueyo residence? I even said that bygones are bygones. What do you want from me?" The last sentence was spoken by the emperor after trying hard to restrain himself. The queen sighed after hearing this. Time passed quickly, more than 20 years have passed. The emperor's concubine was born into a family of military generals. She had a bad temper and was very stubborn since she was a child. She cannot be as gentle as the concubines in the harem and obey the emperor's wishes in everything. The emperor retorted, "Why don't I ask you to be as gentle as water? I don't know about your temper." The queen ignored the emperor's rebuttal, stroked her face, and said helplessly, "I am older. I am not as beautiful as a woman of 15 or 16 years old, and I am not as energetic as they are in serving the emperor. You are also 40 years old. Of course you cannot compare with a woman of 15 or 16 years old, and there is no need to compare. The emperor means that I have never disliked you. Who hasn't come from the age of 15 or 16? It's just that when the queen hears it, she doesn't say that. It's just pure disgust. She is 40 years old and is not worthy to be compared with a 15 or 16-year-old woman. Women have double standards. They say they are not good looking in old age, but their husbands cannot say that. This is a taboo for women. What the emperor is saying is, how can I, the concubine, have the strength and energy to accompany the emperor all night long? The emperor should just stay in the Kyoto palace. After the queen finished speaking, she lay down on the bed angrily and ignored the dog emperor. She was really looking for a scolding. The emperor snorted, "I am the king of a country. I don't need your guidance on where I want to go." Looking back, I found that the queen was lying down to sleep again. His temper was getting worse and worse. Before he left in anger, she went to bed first. The emperor sat on the bed, debating whether to leave or not. "I thought that if I came here and left again, wouldn't it be like letting the gossips in the harem talk nonsense? Just seeing the queen paying no attention to anyone made him extremely angry. After struggling for a long time, the emperor stood up and began to take off his clothes. This time he did not throw them on the ground, but put them on the hangers one by one. At first, the queen thought that the dog emperor was leaving, but she heard the sound of undressing coming from behind. She frowned, showing that she didn't understand. She refused so simply, couldn't he understand? Just when the queen was depressed, the emperor lifted the quilt and got in, lying down next to the queen. Queen. After a long time, the queen finally couldn't stand it anymore and fell asleep without waiting for the dog emperor to make any move. After not having sex for 3 months, the emperor was actually a little excited, but the queen's attitude made him afraid. Afraid that she would kick him down. It's not like the queen has never done this kind of thing. He moved closer to the queen, and when she saw no response, he moved closer until he was close to her body. The emperor turned over and faced the queen. Thinking of the queen's resistance just now, the more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable he felt. I fell asleep thinking about it. 5th watch day. The emperor got up on time for the morning court. After dressing up, he looked at the sleeping queen and decided to be better after falling asleep. Eunuchly reminded in a low voice through the screen, "Your Majesty, it's time to go to the morning court." The emperor stared at the sleeping queen and said, "What exactly do you want me to do?" He sighed and left Fenji Palace. Asterisk. Concubine Su came to Hehuan Hall early in the morning, swinging her handkerchief. Seeing Shen Shuwei, she was a little unhappy thinking that she couldn't ask the man in black about Fengwiu last night. "Princess, I haven't heard anything about Fengwiu. Have you heard about it?" "No, I don't even know who Fengwiu is. He doesn't seem to be from the palace, nor does he seem to be the son or daughter of a minister in the court." Shen Shuwei asked everything he could. No one except Xiao Jinyan knew who Fengwiu was. Concubine Su asked curiously, "Why do you want to ask about Fengwiu?" Shen Shuwei hesitated for a while, then whispered, "Your Highness knows Fengwiu, and our relationship is very good." Concubine Su suddenly realized, "Oh, I understand, you are afraid that Fengwiu will come to snatch His Highness, right?" Shen Shuwei paused after hearing the words, and raised his chin indifferently, "Who is afraid? I'm just curious about who it is. I don't care if I can snatch it away." "That makes sense." Concubine Su sighed, "I really don't understand the mentality of those people who want to force themselves to be forced to marry. They have obviously escaped from marriage, but they still want to catch them back and force them to marry." Shen Shuwei became interested in eating melons. Whose paranoid and overbearing president is this? Concubine Su, who had read the storybook, certainly knew what the paranoid and overbearing president meant. She leaned close to Shen Shuwei's ear and whispered, "That's the man in black." Shen Shu said slightly, "I didn't see that he has a paranoid personality." Concubine Su got up and came to the crib. She didn't see Tao Su, so she turned around and asked, "Where are the babies?" Shen Shu said softly, "Tao Su has grown so big that he can't stay in the house anymore, so the nannies took him out to play." Concubine Su sighed, "That's a pity. I still want to play with De Su." The nannies each held a baby and wandered around the garden. Autumn has just entered, and butterflies can still be seen dancing in the garden. Susu likes butterflies very much. She dances happily and tries to catch the butterflies with her little hands. The royal granddaughter likes butterflies very much. The wet nurse looked at Dao Tao in her arms, pointed at the butterfly and asked, "Emperor grandson, do you like butterflies?" Dao Tao's eyes were all on his sister, and when he saw her dancing happily, he waved too, feeling extremely happy. Concubine Shui had been feeling depressed for several months. The weather was rare today, so she walked around in the garden holding a round fan. These days, she can't even see Xiao Jinyan, let alone sleeping with him. There is no chance to think that mother is more valuable than son. Shuiyao pointed to a few people at the edge of the garden and said, Princess, isn't that the crown princess twin baby? Hearing this, concubine Shui raised her eyes and looked over, and saw the nanny holding a baby. Isn't it the princess twin? Why does she have two children at one time and make the emperor and empress so fond of her? The real mother became the princess based on the value of her children. The princess is much nobler than her. If His Highness lets the princess sleep with you, you can have three, Shui Yao angrily said. Unjust way. The more concubine Shui thought about it, the more unwilling she became, but Xiao Jinyan turned a blind eye to her. Shui Yao. After Shui Yao came closer, concubine Shui gave a few instructions in a low voice. My slave knows. Shui Yao took the order and went to prepare. Seeing the two babies smiling so happily, concubine Shui snorted, and you will stop laughing later. Shui Yao pretended to be passing by with some newly picked flowers. When she saw the baby, she walked over happily. The little grandson of the emperor, the grandson of the emperor, is so cute. Of course, even the emperor and queen like it, the nanny said proudly. Shui Yao lowered her head and glanced at the two gorgeous flowers in her hands, and happily raised them in front of the two babies. Do the babies like my newly picked flowers? The wet nurse looked at the flowers, which were very beautiful and still stained with dew, and thought that the baby would like them very much. The imperial grandson's daughter likes butterflies. I was so happy just now when I held her in my arms and chased butterflies. Come, hold the flowers, the butterflies will fly over. Shui Yao put the flowers into the hands of the babies. After stuffing it, he made an excuse and left. The wet nurse said cheerfully, Susu, aren't the flowers beautiful? Susu curled her lips and tried to throw the flower away, but her little hand let go, and the flower got stuck in the nanny and her clothes, preventing it from falling. When the nurse saw it, she put the flowers into the baby's hand again. She was afraid that she would not be able to hold them firmly, so she held the baby's hand to prevent them from falling. The flower in Dao Tao's hand was held by the nanny. Dao Tao pushed it away with her little hands to express that she didn't like it. When the nanny saw it, she laughed out loud. Dao Tao is a boy and doesn't like flowers. Susu cried wow. The wet nurse hugged and coaxed, what's wrong with Susu? Aren't you holding the flower in your hand? The wet nurse held Dao Tao in her arms and asked, are you hungry? Susu didn't stop crying because of the nanny's coaxing. Instead, she cried more and more fiercely. The wet nurse was extremely anxious. Then let's go back first. The wet nurses hurried back with the two babies in their arms. Shui Yao watched from a distance and heard the children's cries. When she saw them leaving, she went back to resume her life. When concubine Shui saw Shui Yao coming back, she couldn't wait to ask, how's it going? Don't worry, princess. The slave will put the poisonous insects into the petals. When the poisonous insects smell the milky fragrance, they will immediately crawl onto the baby and burrow into the skin. If the crown princess holds the baby, the poisonous insects will also penetrate into the princess's skin and live. Soon Shui Yao said proudly. Concubine Shui raised the corners of her lips. Without her mother and son, His Highness will focus on me. Shui Yao echoed, that's for sure. Shen Shuwei looked a little drowsy while looking at the account book, but when he heard the baby's cry, he woke up immediately. I saw the wet nurse trotting in with Susu in her arms. Princess, Susu keeps crying, I don't know if she is hungry. Show me. Shen Shuwei reached out and took Susu from the nanny's hand. Looking at Susu, her eyes were red and swollen as she cried. She was out of breath, and seemed to be very uncomfortable. My slave was having a great time playing with Susu in the garden. Susu was very happy when she saw the butterfly, and suddenly she cried. I don't know what happened. The wet nurse saw Susu crying like this, and she started crying too. Shen Shuwei felt something was wrong with Susu, and hurriedly grabbed the baby's hand and checked her pulse. Just when Shen Shuwei was checking Susu's pulse, a black bug was crawling up his sleeve. The bug was as big as a sesame seed and could not be found without looking carefully. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 405. Susu cried very hard, which meant she was in great pain. Shen Shuwei felt so distressed when she saw her daughter crying so hard. Chengzi was so anxious that she started crying too when she saw Susu crying so hard. Then Dao Tao started crying too, but Shen Shuwei couldn't take care of her now. When the nurse was coaxing Dao Tao, she felt a tingling in her arm, and the tingling place was a little itchy, so she couldn't help scratching it. Shen Shuwei frowned. Susu's pulse was very chaotic, as if she was poisoned. She laid Susu flat on the couch, took off her red clothes, and began to check Susu's body. At the same time, she ordered, "Chengzi, bring the medicine box." Chengzi wiped her tears and turned to get the medicine box. Susu's skin was white with pink, and there was a black spot on her arm, which was a little red and swollen around it. Shen Shuwei picked it up and checked it carefully and found that it was caused by insects, and it was poisonous insects. Chengzi took the medicine box and opened it on the couch. Shen Shuwei ordered again, "Pour some warm water." Chengzi ran to pour water again. The crying of children in the room was chaotic. Shen Shuwei took out the silver needle and got out the black bug that was desperately drilling into the skin. If it crawled into the blood vessels, the consequences would be unimaginable. Suddenly, she felt a tingling sensation in her arm, followed by an itchy sensation. She frowned and didn't have time to care about what was going on. She continued to deal with the bug. Wang Zhen stepped into the Hehuan palace and heard the crying of the children. Seeing the maid, she stepped forward and asked, "What's wrong? Why are the babies crying all the time?" The maid shook her head and turned away. Wan Xian came to the door with doubts, but was stopped by Little Rabbit. "Miss Wan Xian, is there anything wrong?" Wan Xian said softly, "The Queen Mother misses the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess, so she asked me to come and take them to the Sinning Palace." Little Rabbit was a little embarrassed to hear that. "Miss Wan Xian, please wait a moment, I will report to my master." Wan Xian nodded, "Okay." Little Rabbit turned and went in. He was very distressed when he heard the babies crying. He came to the bed and reported, "Master, Wan Xian of the Sinning Palace has received the Queen Mother's order and wants the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess to go to the Sinning Palace to accompany the Queen Mother." Shen Shuwei said, "How can the babies go to Sinning Palace in this state?" "Palace. Go back to Miss Wangzhen and tell her that the baby is not feeling well and can't go now. Go to visit the Queen Mother when she is well." "Yes, Master." The little rabbit came out of the inner room and said apologetically, "Miss Wangzhen, please go back and tell the Queen Mother that the Crown Prince and his granddaughter are not feeling well. When they are not feeling well, my master will personally hold them to visit the Queen Mother." Wangzhen looked inside and said sympathetically, "I heard the babies crying and guessed that they were not feeling well. I will go back and tell the Queen Mother." The little rabbit said, "Thank you, Miss Wangzhen." Wangzhen smiled and turned to leave the Hehuan Palace. In the inner room, Susu and Dao Tao were crying fiercely. Shen Shuwei's forehead was full of sweat. The little bug was too small to be taken out, and the silver needle would prick the skin, and Susu couldn't stand the pain. Finally, she took the little bug out of Susu's arm and put it in a small transparent glass bottle. Shen Shuwei bandaged the wound on her arm as quickly as possible, and then hugged the crying Susu into her arms. "Okay, Susu, stop crying, let's drink some water, okay?" She raised her head and looked at Dao Tao, who was crying very hard at this time. "Chengzi, you feed Susu some water." Chengzi nodded impatiently, "Okay." Shen Shuwei handed Susu to Chengzi, turned around to hug Dao Tao, and found that the nurse's arm was scratched. She asked while taking off Dao Tao's clothes, What's wrong with your arm? Master, I don't know, it seems like I was bitten by a bug just now, and then it itches badly. The nurse scratched uncomfortably and said. Shen Shui's attention was all on the babies. When she thought of it, the itching sensation on her arm also came with it, which made her suspect that the symptoms on her and the nurse were very similar to those on the babies. It's just that she can't take care of the adults now. Xiao Jinyan hurried back after getting the news, and heard the babies crying non-stop, and he strode in. After Susu drank the water, she was very well behaved in Chengxi's arms. There were tears on her long eyelashes, and her eyes were red and swollen. Xiao Jinyan saw Shen Shui holding a silver needle in her hand and picking something on Dao Tao's arm. What's wrong with the baby? Shen Shui looked calm on the surface, but she was actually crying silently without anyone noticing. She choked and said, a poisonous little bug crawled into Dao Tao's skin. Once it crawled into the blood vessels, the consequences would be disastrous. Xiao Jinyan knew the seriousness of the matter after hearing it. Seeing his son crying like this, he felt so distressed. Finally, with Shen Shui's unremitting efforts, the little bug that had drilled into the flesh and blood was taken out. Xiao Jinyan looked at the sesame-sized little bug, which was rampant on his son's skin. No wonder his son cried so hard. Shen Shui sent his son into Xiao Jinyan's arms. Your Highness, hold your son and feed him some water and coax him. Okay. Xiao Jinyan held his son, picked up the small teacup on the low table, and coaxed him while feeding him water. Shen Shui then checked the nurse's pulses to see if they also had black poisonous insects. Wang Xin returned to the Sinning Palace. The Queen Mother did not see the Crown Prince and his daughter, and her eyes were full of confusion. Wang Xin, why did you come back empty-handed? Where are the children? Wan Xian saw Chang Liangyuan beating the Queen Mother's legs. She lowered her eyebrows and took a few steps forward. She said warmly, Your Majesty, the Crown Princess said the babies are unwell and they won't be able to come this time. The Queen Mother was extremely angry when she heard this. Princess, what do you mean? The AI family just wants to see the babies. How dare she refuse such a small request? Does she take the AI family seriously? Wan Xian comforted her softly, Your Majesty, maybe the babies are really unwell. Your Majesty, please don't be angry. How can you get better if you are so angry? The Queen Mother snorted, Look at the AI family. The princess is deliberately making excuses not to let the AI family see the babies. Chang Liangyuan beat her legs and advised, Grandma Huang, don't be so angry. Who asked His Highness to pamper her? It's hard for other sisters in the East Palace to see His Highness. At the end, I didn't forget to complain. After hearing this, the Queen Mother lowered her head and looked at Chang Liangyuan, How often do you go to bed? Chang Liangyuan lowered her eyes and said aggrievedly, Grandma Huang, Your Highness dotes on the Crown Princess. It is difficult for us sisters to even meet each other, let alone sleep with her. The Queen Mother slapped the table angrily, The Crown Princess is too overbearing. Even the Queen dare not do this. She dares to dominate the Crown Prince. Chang Liangyuan hurriedly comforted her, Grandma Huang, don't be angry, we are used to it. Once the Queen Mother got used to it, it meant that the Crown Prince had always doted on the Crown Princess alone, and if this continued, the royal family would have few heirs. Inform the Emperor that the AI family has something to talk to him about. Here the maid left and went to the imperial study. The Emperor strode in and saw the Queen Mother. He stepped forward to salute, Mother. When the Queen Mother saw the Emperor coming, she complained, Emperor, it's not the AI family who said that. The AI family just wanted to see the grandson-daughter of the Emperor's grandson, and asked Wan Xian to carry her over. The princess made an excuse not to be held, but the AI family still where is Grandma Zheng? The Emperor comforted him and said, Is there any misunderstanding with the Queen? The princess has a gentle personality. How come she doesn't let the Queen see the baby? The AI family still tells lies about the younger generation. The Queen Mother felt a little dissatisfied. Wan Xian, tell the Emperor what the princess said. Yes, Wan Xian stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, the Crown Princess said that the babies are unwell and wants to bring the babies to visit the Queen Mother next time. The Emperor asked, Why are the babies feeling unwell? Have you invited an imperial doctor? Wan Xian shook her head and said, Go back to the Emperor, the common girls don't know. The Emperor was a little worried. He looked at the Queen Mother and explained, Mother, look, the babies are not feeling well. I didn't mean to prevent you from seeing them. The Queen Mother snorted, Do you believe such an obvious excuse, Emperor? If you don't believe me, then I'll go to the East Palace and have a look. Don't be angry, Mother. After the Emperor finished speaking, he bowed and left Sinning Palace. The Emperor left quickly and told Eunuch Li, Go to the East Palace to see a few more imperial doctors. Today, I originally planned to meet the woman you wanted to marry with the Queen, but something unexpected happened, so I had to cancel. Go and tell the Queen that I have something to do today and can't go to Fenji Palace. I'll see you another day. Here the little eunuch was about to leave when the Emperor stopped him again. Don't tell the Queen that the babies are unwell, so as not to worry her. This servant knows. The young eunuch took the order and went to Fenji Palace. When the Queen Mother saw that the Emperor had left, she remembered that there was one more thing she had not said and sighed. She is indeed old and her memory is failing her. Wan Xian hit the Queen Mother on the shoulder. The Queen Mother is still young, she is just angry. After hearing this, the Queen Mother was comforted and said, You know how to make the AI family happy. Inside the East Palace, Shen Shuwei spent a long time removing the black bugs from the nanny's arms and letting them drink water. After the treatment was completed, Shen Shuwei rolled up his sleeves and saw a large area of redness and swelling on his fair skin, and black bugs had already penetrated into the skin. Xiao Jinyan thought it was okay, but when he saw Shen Chu slightly rolling up his sleeves to reveal the redness and swelling, he had a bad feeling in his heart. What's wrong with you? A bug has gotten in. Shen Shuwei took out a sharp knife and disinfected it after every use. Xiao Jinyan put his son into the crib, turned around and came to Shen Shuwei. He felt extremely distressed when he saw her trying to cut open the skin with a knife. Then if you didn't take out the bug earlier, wouldn't it have been so long that the bug got inside? Shen Chu said without raising his head slightly, I didn't care about saving the baby just now. I'll just take it out. Xiao Jinyan was so angry that he raised his head, glanced at the people in the room, and asked coldly, Who is taking care of the baby today? How could the baby be exposed to poisonous bugs? The two nurses were so frightened that they knelt on the ground and cried. Your Highness, I was playing with the babies in the garden today. I kept holding them in my arms. I don't know how they got infected with poisonous insects. Xiao Jinyan asked again, Has anyone ever held a baby? The nannies shook their heads. The slaves have always held the baby, and I have never let anyone else hold the baby. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 406. Xiao Jinyan didn't believe that poisonous insects would crawl onto the baby for no reason, and Xiaju would also have poisonous insects on her body. He slammed the table angrily. Where did you take the baby to play? Tell the truth. The nurses were trembling with fear. Susu was tired of crying and wanted to sleep, but she woke up from the shock. She grabbed Chengzi's sleeve, raised her head and looked at her father with a confused face. Shen Shuwei saw his daughter's reaction from the corner of his eye, and kicked Xiao Jinyan's leg. Be quiet, you scared your daughter. Xiao Jinyan turned his head to look at his daughter, only to see her staring at him with a puzzled look. He comforted her, Susu, be good, father is catching the bad guys. Susu couldn't understand what Xiao Jinyan said. She pouted her pink little mouth. Daddy. Since Xiao Jinyan knew that daddy meant father, he was very happy when he heard his daughter call daddy. Father, please keep your voice down. Xiao Jinyan retracted his gaze and looked at Xiaju first, only to see that she was still looking for the poisonous insects, and he was inevitably very worried. This palace will help you. Shen Shuwei said, the blood of poisonous insects is corrosive. If you accidentally crush it, it will be over. How could Xiao Jinyan dare to do it after hearing this? Then you should do it yourself, it will be more measured. This is the only way. Shen Shuwei gritted her teeth and continued to look for poisonous insects. Just when Xiao Jinyan was about to continue asking the wet nurses, the shrill voice of the eunuch came from outside the door, the emperor is here. Xiao Jinyan saw that his father had come, and turned his head to look at Shen Shuwei. This palace will go out to meet him first, don't panic. I know. Shen Shuwei looked down at her arm and continued to look for insects. Xiao Jinyan stood up and walked out, and saw that his father had come to the door. He stepped forward to greet him, Father. The emperor saw the prince and asked in a deep voice, I heard that the babies are not feeling well. What is going on? Xiao Jinyan said, Father, the babies are infected with poisonous insects. Not only the babies, but also the crown princess and the wet nurse are infected with poisonous insects. These poisonous insects are very powerful and like to drill into people's skin. If you are not careful, your life will be in danger. The emperor was shocked when he heard this and asked hurriedly, How are the babies? Have you called the imperial physician? Xiao Jinyan was shocked to realize that he did not call the imperial physician when over, because after knowing that Xiao Ju could perform medical skills, he rarely called the imperial physician when. Father, don't worry, the poisonous insects on the babies have been taken out, and they are fine for the time being, but the poisonous insects on the crown princess have not been taken out yet. The emperor said, I ask someone to go to the imperial hospital to call the imperial physician, and go in to see the babies first. Xiao Jinyan went in with the emperor, and Shen Shuwei was in the inner room. The babies have been carried to the couch outside. Because of Xiao Jinyan's pat and the shock just now, the two babies are now very awake. When the emperor came in and saw Su, he couldn't wait to stretch out his arms to Susu. He said happily, Grandpa Huang, can you hug me? Although Susu is only 6 months old, she knows who treats her well. Grandpa Huang often hugs her, so Susu happily reaches out for a hug when she sees Grandpa Huang. The emperor was very happy to see his granddaughter reaching out for a hug. He picked Susu up and looked at Susu's red eyes with tears, feeling very distressed. Susu is so cute, how can a poisonous insect bear to create a baby? It is difficult for Xiao Jinyan to disagree with his father's statement. Su is so cute, how can anyone do it? This kind of poisonous insect has never appeared in the East Palace. I guess someone did it on purpose. The emperor's eyes turned cold when he heard this. Who dares to hurt Susu? I will never let her off easily. Xiao Jinyan replied, I don't know yet, I'm investigating. The emperor said angrily, then investigate quickly, I want to see who dares to harm Su. Now whenever the two babies are mentioned, they will be called Su. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded, I will definitely find out who dares to harm Su. The emperor was reluctant to put Susu down, so he teased her. Xiao Jinyan walked into the inner room and saw Shen Shuwei was still dealing with the poisonous insects, and her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. He took out a square handkerchief from his sleeve pocket and wiped the sweat for her while asking, How is it? Have you found the poisonous insect? Almost. I have found it. Shen Shuwei took the tweezers to hold the black poisonous insect. She breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, I took it out. Xiao Jinyan looked at the wound on her arm caused by the blade. Although the wound was small, he still felt distressed when he saw it. I will bandage it for you. Shen Shuwei had spent a lot of energy and strength to find the poisonous insect. It would be better if someone bandaged it for her. Okay. Xiao Jinyan took out the window sticker from the medicine box. Xiao Ju said that this was specially prepared for small wounds and was very practical. It didn't take long to apply a few band-aids. Shen Shuwei picked up the teacup on the low table and drank a few sips of water before she felt relieved. Xiao Jinyan saw that her face looked a little bad, which also showed the harm of the poisonous insect. No wonder Tao Su cried so hard. I think something is fishy. I'm afraid someone wants to harm Desu on purpose. When Shen Shuwei heard that someone wanted to harm her baby on purpose, she was immediately unhappy. Your Highness, who could it be? Xiao Jinyan brushed away her hair from her forehead. I don't know yet. You take a rest. I will find out about this matter. Shen Shuwei nodded. Whoever dares to hurt Desu will not be let off. Xiao Jinyan said, I will. When the imperial physician came, he examined Desu carefully. After the emperor repeatedly confirmed that there was no problem, the emperor breathed a sigh of relief. The emperor looked at Susu in his arms and fell asleep after playing tiredly. His little appearance turned into a cute one. Susu is so cute. The emperor hugged her and was reluctant to let go. It was a pity that he was the king of a country and had many things to do every day, so he couldn't hold Susu all the time. He carefully put Susu into the crib. Grandpa Huang goes to work first and will come see you when he has some free time. The emperor reluctantly looked away, and after leaving the East Palace, he went directly to Sining Palace. The Queen Mother had just woken up from her nap and was drinking the newly brewed tea by Wan Xin. The emperor said with a slight smile on his lips, Mother, I have just returned from the East Palace. The babies are indeed unwell. They are crying incessantly and their eyes are red from crying. It is reasonable for the crown princess not to hold them, for fear of disturbing the queen. The Queen Mother became even more angry when she heard this, so serious. How did the crown princess become a mother? The emperor explained, Mother, the crown princess cannot hold the babies all the time. Aren't the wet nurses taking care of them? The crown princess is also unwell. In the eyes of the AI family, the crown princess is an unqualified mother. Why does the emperor like to protect such a woman? Thinking of what the queen had done, the queen mother still felt that concubine Su was more suitable to be the queen. The emperor guessed the meaning of the queen mother's words as soon as he heard it. Mother, you have just returned to the palace. Once you get along with the crown princess more, you will know that she is a very good child, and the queen likes her very much. Although the queen mother was older, she responded very quickly. Did the emperor make the queen the crown princess because he liked her? The emperor explained, it's not all the queen's fault. I hope that the babies will be legitimate children rather than concubine children. Besides, the crown princess does not have a prominent family background, but she is still a good person. I believe in the queen's vision. The queen mother snorted. In the royal family, the former dynasty and the harem are closely connected, and the future queen is especially important. The AI family heard that the prince only doted on the crown prince, and the other women in the East Palace did not even have a chance to see the prince. No wonder he has had the concubine for more than 2 years. Only 2 children. The emperor rubbed his temples, feeling quite a headache. What the queen said makes sense. I will urge the prince to soak up the rain and dew, and extend the heirs. What's the use of just urging? The prince must take practical actions. I understand. The emperor came out of Sining Palace and took a deep breath. If he had a way to make the prince wet, would he still wait until now? No, we have to deal with business quickly. We're going to Fenji Palace tonight. As long as he doesn't leave, the queen won't be able to do anything to him. The emperor went directly to the imperial study to handle government affairs. After the emperor left, the queen mother had a sullen face. Wan Xin smiled and comforted, Queen Mother, I have prepared flour cakes. After you eat them, you will definitely feel better. You still understand the AI family? The Queen Mother took Wan Xian's hand and suddenly asked, how about the AI family agreeing to marry you to the prince? It's okay to be a good lady. Wan Xian lowered her eyes and said shyly, Queen Mother, I can't bear to leave you. You are like my own grandmother. I want to spend more time with you and am not in a hurry to get married. The Queen Mother was very happy after hearing this. Silly boy, even if you marry into the palace, you can always come to accompany the AI family. Wan Xian showed a gentle and slightly naughty smile, but I just want to be by the Queen Mother's side and serve the Queen Mother all the time. The Queen Mother happily responded, then wait a little longer. Shen Shuwei woke up after sleeping for an hour and went to see Tao Su immediately. Tao Su also woke up at this moment, and was sitting in the crib, playing happily with snowballs. A child's happiness is very simple and easy to satisfy, as if the bite by the poisonous insect had never happened. Susu grabbed Suijuan's tail and dragged Suijuan to her side, muttering with her pink mouth, Mummy, Mummy. Xuetuan called out, Meow. Shen Shuwei couldn't help laughing when she saw it. Susu is getting better and better at calling mommy. Seeing Desu and the others playing, she took out the glass bottle and began to study the black poisonous insects inside. Concubine Shui had been waiting for news. Seeing Shuiyao walking in quickly, she didn't even bother to drink tea. Are they all dead? Princess, I didn't hear the news. The emperor is here and just left. It doesn't look like something happened. Your Highness is investigating the matter thoroughly, Shui Yao said. Concubine Shui clenched the teacup in her hand, her eyes full of reluctance. Such poisonous bugs will burrow into the skin and not be taken out in time. They will definitely die. They can't still be alive. Shui Yao was also very confused, but I see that Hehuan Hall is as usual, there is nothing abnormal. Princess, if you don't wait and see, there will definitely be good news. That's all. Concubine Shui frowned. Now she could only wait. She didn't believe that Shen Shuwei and the two children were so lucky. In the side room, the wet nurses have been restless since the accident happened to the babies. They feel scared and confused at the same time. We didn't go anywhere else today, so why did we get infected by poisonous insects? I'm also wondering. We've always held our little masters in our arms, but we don't dare to hug them. Fortunately, the young masters are all fine, otherwise we might have to be buried with them. No, my hands and feet are weak now that I think about it. The wet nurse seemed to have thought of something. Could it be related to Shuiyao? She can send flowers to the babies, but other than that, she has never met anyone else. P.S. One more update. Good night, babies. Acting like a baby and being cute, please support me with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 407. The two wet nurses recalled what happened this morning. Although they met several people coming and going, the one who impressed them most was Shuiyao, because she brought flowers to coax the young masters. The more the nannies thought something was wrong with you, they hurried out of the house to tell His Highness. At this time, in the study room, the nannies only took the young masters to play in the garden today and did not go to other places. There were many maids and slaves coming and going. After investigation, someone saw concubine Shui's maid Shui Yao approaching the young masters that day. Qin Xiao respectfully reported the results of the whole day's investigation. Xiao Jinyan heard concubine Shui frown. He still knew what concubine Shui was thinking. If she sent someone to poison Tao Su, it was very likely. It's just that it's not easy to put poisonous insects on Desu in front of everyone. Go and have a look at concubine Shui. Qin Xiao lowered his eyebrows and nodded, yes. Just as Xiao Jinyan stood up and left, Wei Qi came in and clasped his fists to report, Master, the nannies want to see you. Xiao Jinyan moved for a moment, then sat down again and ordered, Let them come in. Not long after Wei Qi went out. He led the wet nurses in. After what happened today, the wet nurses were also frightened and walked in cautiously. Your Highness, I remember that concubine Shui's maid came to tease the young masters today. Your Highness, there were other people passing by during this period. It was Shui Yao who sent flowers to make the young masters happy. I always feel that there is something wrong. The two nannies said nonchalantly. Xiao Jinyan also guessed at this moment that Shui Yao might have sent the poisonous insects to Tao Su through the flower delivery girl, and the nanny and Xiaju were also infected with the poisonous insects. There was unprecedented anger in his eyes. He stood up, walked around the desk, and strode out. Wei Qi and Qin Xiao looked at each other and followed quickly. The nannies were startled by Xiao Jinyan's cold and stern aura and did not react for a long time. It's time to turn on the lights. Xiao Jinyan came to Kameng Palace with anger. Concubine Shui was extremely happy when her maid reported that Xiao Jinyan was here. Your Highness has finally come to Kameng Palace. Shui Yao, can you see if there is any stain on my makeup? Shui Yao smiled and praised, the princess's natural beauty, even with a little application of powder, is unparalleled. Your Highness will definitely stay at Kameng Palace tonight. Concubine Shui felt even happier after hearing this. She straightened her appearance a little before coming out and blessing Xiao Jin's body. Wish you all the best, Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan glanced coldly at concubine Shui in front of her and Shui Yao behind her, holding back the anger in her heart and not attacking immediately. Everyone, get up. Concubine Shui stood up straight and looked at Xiao Jinyan with a smile. Thank you, Your Highness, it's dinner time now, can we have dinner together? Xiao Jinyan took one look at her beautiful face and felt extremely disgusted. He looked away and said yet. Concubine Shui happily ordered Shui Yao, hurry and bring the food. Shui Yao went to the kitchen with a smile and put the prepared wine on the table. Concubine Shui is a princess of a country. Although there is a prescribed quota for food, the food she has spent money on is better than others, no worse than that of the crown princess. Concubine Shui picked up the jug and filled the jug in front of Xiao Jinyan with wine. Xiao Jinyan looked at concubine Shui's actions indifferently but did not stop her. Concubine Shui introduced shyly, Your Highness, I brought this wine from Suiyu. In Suiyu Kingdom, only husband and wife can drink wine together. I have been keeping it for a long time and want to drink it with Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan heard the cold warning, my wife is the crown princess, concubine Shui should always remember her current status and not cross the line. Concubine Shui was stunned for a moment, her hands on her knees were tightly grasping her sleeves, and she was complaining in her heart. She was just doing it for fun, should she take it seriously? It's not certain who will be the queen in the future. After complaining in his heart, he humbly admitted his mistake on the surface, I am outspoken, Your Highness, please don't be angry, I will take care of it in my heart. Listening to concubine Shui's unreasonable thoughts, Xiao Jinyan's lips curled up with a hint of sarcasm, you are so ambitious, queen, are you worthy? Concubine Shui looked at the food in front of her and couldn't let go of this perfect opportunity to sleep with her. She picked up her chopsticks, not knowing which dishes Xiao Jinyan liked to eat, so she picked the common cedar fish and put it into Xiao Jinyan's bowl. Your Highness, I have eaten this Yuchan concubine several times. It tastes very delicious. Please try it. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the fish in front of him. How could he be in the mood to eat at this time? What's more, the woman sitting opposite him made him sick. He raised his eyes to look at Shui Yao, the maid behind concubine Shui, and said to concubine Shui, I heard from the wet nurse that Shui Yao, the maid next to you, likes my baby very much. Concubine Shui was shocked when she heard this. Could it be that Xiao Jinyan was suspicious? Shui Yao stepped forward with a guilty conscience and knelt on the ground, Your Highness, I just think the babies are cute and haven't forgotten my identity, so I didn't hug the little masters. Xiao Jinyan looked at Shui Yao's guilty behavior coldly, I didn't accuse you, so what are you afraid of? I want to praise you. The babies like the flowers you sent. Shui Yao breathed a sigh of relief. It's okay if the young masters like it. I'm not here to make the young masters happy. While concubine Shui was relieved, she was also very unwilling. She clearly asked Shui Yao to release poisonous insects. Poisonous insects like the smell of milk the most. The baby and the princess have the smell of milk, so they are also the clearest targets. How could it be possible that nothing happened? Xiao Jinyan heard what she wanted to hear the most. It was not an exaggeration to say that concubine Shui was as vicious as a snake. How could she be so ruthless as Tao Su, who was so cute? Before I came, I saw the babies playing with flowers. The two little guys didn't know how to protect the flowers at all. They were torn into pieces. Let Shui Yao pick 2 more fresh flowers and send them to Hehuan Palace tomorrow. Shui Yao nodded in response, your servant obeys your command. Qin Xiao stepped in and reported, Master, Lord Lu wants to see you for something. Xiao Jinyan nodded, I know, I'll go now. Concubine Shui finally waited for Xiao Jinyan to come. She originally wanted to take advantage of the meal and stay overnight to sleep with him. How could she bear to let go of such a good opportunity? Your Highness, you haven't had your meal yet. Can you leave after you have your meal? Xiao Jinyan said calmly, dinner can be eaten at any time. Business can't be delayed. You eat first and I'll leave. When concubine Shui saw Xiao Jinyan standing up to leave, she also stood up and chased after him, Your Highness, doesn't Lord Lu know that this is dinner time? What can't be dealt with tomorrow? Xiao Jinyan said coldly, of course it's business. Concubine Shui is a princess of a country, how can you not tell the priorities? Concubine Shui was speechless for a moment. She said aggrievedly, I just don't want your highness to leave. I didn't say it's not important. Xiao Jinyan said coldly, it's good to know. You should learn more from the crown princess. The crown princess is considerate, well-educated, and knows the limits. She knows the priorities. After saying that, she left with a wave of her sleeves. Concubine Shui stood there, watching Xiao Jinyan's back as she left, feeling unwilling. You actually compared me to Shen Shui. Who is Shen Shui? How can she compare with this princess? Shui Yao was also very angry, and did not forget to comfort her, Princess, calm down, don't get angry and hurt yourself. At this time, concubine Shui was angry, how could she listen to the comforting words? When you go to send flowers tomorrow, send a few more flowers to the crown princess, and put some poisonous insects. I don't believe that they are lucky enough to escape once and can escape twice. When they die, the crown princess will be mine. Shui Yao nodded and agreed, I know, I will send it to Hehuan Palace early tomorrow morning. After leaving Kimeng Palace, Xiao Jinyan's face was gloomy. He looked back at Kimeng Palace, and he would feel sick if he looked at it for one more time. After calming down his anger, Xiao Jinyan returned to Hehuan Palace and had dinner with Shen Shui. In fact, Xiao Jinyan didn't think about having dinner with concubine Shui the moment he stepped into Kimeng Palace. Qin Xiao said that Lord Lu had something to ask for, but it was just an excuse to leave, an excuse that left concubine Shui speechless. After dinner, Xiao Jinyan looked at Tao Su, who had just finished bathing and was playing in the crib, as if what happened today had never happened. Xiao Jinyan waited for Shen Shui to come out of the bath and check the wound on her arm. Although it was a minor injury, he would feel at ease after seeing it. I just went to the dream palace. Shen Shui paused after hearing this and asked in confusion, what did you do in the dream palace? I have already found out that concubine Shui asked her personal maid to release those poisonous insects. Xiao Jinyan told the story again. Shen Shui hadn't seen concubine Shui for a long time. When she heard that it was her who did it, she immediately got angry. It turned out to be concubine Shui. She is so evil. Desu is so cute. How could she have the heart to kill her? No, if she dares to hurt my baby, I will not let her off. Xiao Jinyan hugged her in his arms, with a murderous coldness in his eyes. I will not let her go either, but she is the princess of Suiyu. We must have solid evidence to convict her. I know, but she must be made to suffer. Desu cried so miserably today because of the pain. She must be made to suffer. Shen Shuwei felt so distressed when she thought of her baby crying so hard. She was a salted fish, but she was not easy to bully. Xiao Jinyan nodded, yeah. The next morning, Shuiyao went to the backyard of Kimeng Palace to collect fresh flowers. These flowers were seeds brought from Suiyu Kingdom, which were not available in Daxia. After picking, she took the flowers and sprinkled some water. When they were almost at Hehuan Palace, she secretly put the poisonous insects into the petals, which was not easy to be noticed. Shen Shuwei was playing with Desu in the room, and Chengzi came in to report, Master, Shuiyao from Kimeng Palace has brought flowers. Shen Shuwei said lightly, let her in. Yes. After Chengzi left, he led Shuiyao in a short while later. Shuiyao took the flowers and saluted a few steps forward, smiling and said, Crown Princess, His Highness asked me to collect some fresh flowers yesterday for the young masters to play with. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 408. Shen Chu glanced at the flower in Shuiyao's hand. It was the same variety as the flowers in the hands of the nannies yesterday. The poisonous insects were hidden in the petals, making it difficult for others to find them. The wet nurses never thought that anyone would make a fuss about the flowers. Shen Chu slightly let go of Susu's hand, got off the couch, walked slowly to Shuiyao, and looked at the delicate flowers in her hand. They were beautiful, but unfortunately they were poisonous. The flowers are beautiful, no wonder the babies like them so much. Shuiyao introduced with a smile on her face, the crown princess does not know that this flower is a seed brought by Shuiyu. It is only found in Kimeng Palace, but it is a precious species. No wonder I haven't seen it before. It turns out they are flowers from Suiyu Kingdom. Shen Shuwei stretched out her hand to take the flowers from Shuiyao's hand. The flowers are very beautiful. I accepted them for the babies. Could you please Shuiyao to bring them to concubine Shuiyao? In short, thank you very much for the flowers. The crown princess is so polite. The most important thing is that the babies like it. Shuiyao pointed to another bouquet of flowers and said, this is specially given to the crown princess for appreciation. Shen Shuwei looked at the unusually beautiful flowers in Shuiyao's arms. They were as red as blood, a bit redder than roses. Really? Concubine Shui is so thoughtful. Then I'll accept it without mercy, Shen Shuwei said, taking the last bouquet of flowers from Shuiyao's hand. When Shuiyao came to Hehuan Hall, Chengzi also went to Kimeng Hall holding a pot of flowers. The little palace maid came in and reported, My lord, the spring joy of Hehuan Palace is here. Concubine Shui frowned when she heard Chengzi from Hehuan Palace coming. What is she here for? The little palace maid replied, I'm here to give you something. Concubine Shui frowned, giving something? Giving her something for no reason is definitely not good. Let her in. Here after the little palace maid left, she let Chun 11 in. This is the second time Chengzi has entered Kimeng Palace, the first time was last year. Chun 11 stepped forward and said, Concubine Shui, my master heard yesterday that Concubine Shui would send flowers to Hehuan Hall today. As a courtesy, he asked his servant to bring Concubine Shui a pot of flowers. Concubine Shui glanced at the flower in her arms. It was a very yellow flower. What she gave was a very precious flower, but the crown princess actually gave back a wild flower that no one wanted. The dignified princess not only has no taste but also has no vision. Thank you, crown princess, for me. She looked away and continued to drink tea. Chengzi was not angry even after being ignored. She smiled and asked, How long has it been since concubine Shui has been in the palace? Concubine Shui frowned when she saw Changzi still not leaving. It's been less than 2 years since you entered the palace, what's wrong? Chun 11's face suddenly turned cold. Concubine Shui has been in the palace for so long. Don't you know that people with higher status than you need to personally accept the gifts given to you? What's more, if it is a gift from the crown princess, Concubine Shui not only needs thank you for picking it up in person. In the last sentence, Changzi's specially emphasized tone was quite like that of an old nun in the palace. Concubine Shui felt dissatisfied when she heard this, but there were rules in the palace, so she thought that her majestic princess didn't understand etiquette. Concubine Shui put down the teacup, stood up reluctantly, and took the flower pot from Chun 11. She smelled an unpleasant smell as soon as she got closer, and she frowned. Thank you, Crown Princess, for the reward, he cursed in his heart, and the wretched servant quickly got out of here. Changzi seemed to have guessed what Concubine Shui was thinking. Looking at her frown, she asked with a serious face, Concubine Shui doesn't seem to like the gift from my master. Concubine Shui held her breath. In order to make Changzi leave quickly, she forced a smile. I like it. How can I not like this gift from the crown princess? Changzi nodded with satisfaction. That's good. Concubine Shui didn't leave even after seeing Changzi. She was already cursing her mother in her heart. She couldn't hold it in any longer. Changzi saw that Concubine Shui was suppressing her blush, and then continued, this flower is very precious. Only Hehuan Palace has it. The princess spent a lot of energy and time to cultivate it. The flowers are very delicate. Concubine Shui's forehead, you must remember to sprinkle an appropriate amount of water every morning, and then put it under the sun to absorb enough sunlight. If you are not careful, the flowers will wither. Concubine Shui's face turned red, and she finally couldn't hold back her breath and almost fainted. When Changzi saw Concubine Shui's expression of almost fainting, she couldn't help but laugh, and then she held it back. Concubine Shui, please remember, this servant will go back to her life soon. Changzi turned around, smiled, and walked out with cheerful steps. As soon as Changzi left, Concubine Shui immediately threw the flower pot in her arms and said with a look of disgust, it stinks so much, why are you so precious? I don't know where I dug the wildflowers, so throw them away. The little palace maid shivered as she looked at the broken flower pot on the ground. My lord, this is a reward from the crown princess. Concubine Shui glared at the little palace maid. I told you to throw it away, where is the nonsense? Slave, just take it and throw it away. The little palace maid didn't dare to speak anymore. She knelt on the ground, collected the broken flower pots and flowers, and threw them into the back garden. Concubine Shui lowered her head and smelled the smell on her body. She still felt it was very smelly. Prepare hot water. I want to take a bath. I'm so worried. The maids quickly prepared hot water for Concubine Shui to take a bath. Concubine Shui felt that they were not as comfortable as Shui Yao's service, so she sent them away together. After the maids exited, Concubine Shui lay in the tub. She didn't sleep well last night, so she was a little drowsy. At this time, dozens of snakes were approaching the window at an alarming speed, crawling in from the window sill, and looking inside with their little heads raised. They all seemed to have a common goal, which was the things in the bathtub. After looking around for a while, the snakes began to crawl down from the window sill, as if being pulled by some force, and crawled all the way to the tub. For snakes, barrels cannot stop them from moving forward. I saw them climbing up at an obvious speed. Concubine Shui, who was concentrating with her eyes closed, didn't know that dozens of snakes were approaching her. One of them crawled the fastest. It climbed all the way to Concubine Shui's neck and circled around her neck. After completing the circle, the snake raised its head and spit out the snake letter towards Concubine Shui. The remaining snakes also crawled into the tub one after another. Concubine Shui felt it was difficult to breathe. She opened her eyes suddenly and saw a snake spitting out snake seeds at her. Her eyes widened, her shoulders shook with fear, and she screamed, "Ah!" Concubine Shui rolled out of the tub while crawling. She was so frightened that her legs became weak and she fell to the ground. At this time, several slower snakes had not yet climbed onto the tub. When they saw Concubine Shui falling to the ground, they crawled towards her one after another. Concubine Shui had been pampered since she was a child, and her skin was very delicate. After such a fall, her body was covered with bruises. She raised her head and saw several snakes spitting snake seeds at her. Ah! Concubine Shui was so frightened that she rolled over and crawled out. The maid outside the door heard the screams and hurriedly pushed the door open and saw Concubine Shui lying on the ground wet and miserable. At the same time, Hehuan Hall. Shui Yao saw Shen Shui accept the flower and blessed his body. That slave has returned to his life. Shen Shui stopped Shui Yao, who was about to leave. Wait a minute. Shui Yao stopped, turned to look at Shen Shui, and asked doubtfully, "Is there anything else wrong with the crown princess?" Shen Shui smiled slightly. "Of course, I heard from the old man that the more beautiful the flowers, the easier it is to attract bees and butterflies, as well as some small bugs. You see, the flowers are so beautiful. What if there are bugs? You help me first. Can I catch the bugs?" Shui Yao was afraid that Shen Shui would find little bugs in the petals, so she hurriedly explained, "Princess, this is a flower picked by my servant. When I came here, I rinsed it with water and checked carefully. There are no bugs." "Princess, don't worry." "So you've already checked it?" Shen Shui confirmed again and again. "Are you sure there are no bugs?" Shui Yao promised, "No, Crown Princess, don't worry." Shen Shui smiled slightly, "I believe you." Shui Yao secretly breathed a sigh of relief. That slave has gone back to resume his life. Shen Shui kept the same smile as before. "Wait a moment." Shui Yao looked at Shen Shui in confusion. "Is there anything else you want to tell the crown princess?" Shen Shui said softly, "Of course, you just stand still and watch." Doubt flashed in Shui Yao's eyes. Shen Shui brought the flowers to the low table, which had been covered with a white cloth. She placed the flowers on the white cloth. Turning around, he picked up the small kettle and slowly sprinkled water on the flowers. Shui Yao looked at Shen Shui's behavior with confusion and couldn't help but remind her, "Princess, this slave has already sprinkled water to keep it fresh after picking it. There is no need to sprinkle water." "That's different." Shen Shui raised the kettle in his hand and said with a smile, "This is fairy water, it can make flowers show their original shape." "Ah!" Shui Yao looked confused. Shen Shui withdrew his gaze and continued to sprinkle water. After sprinkling the appropriate amount, Shen Shui put the kettle aside, picked up the prepared glass bottle and placed it on the low table. After a while, I saw several small black bugs crawling out of the petals, and then crawled into the glass bottle one after another. Shui Yao was shocked at first when she saw this scene, and then her face turned pale with fear. Shen Shui turned slightly to look at Shui Yao, tilted his head and looked at her. "Didn't you say there are no bugs? Then where did you get these black and poisonous bugs?" Shui Yao's legs softened and she knelt on the ground, forcing herself to explain, "Princess, I don't know, but it may be the bugs in the petals, which should be non-toxic." Shen Shui stared at her slightly, "But you just said that you washed it with water and checked that there were no bugs. Do you think I am a 3-year-old child who is so easy to fool?" "Princess, I didn't fool you, and I don't know what happened." Shui Yao denied it. As long as she didn't admit it, she didn't see the poisonous bug she released anyway. Xiao Jinyan walked in from the outside and glanced coldly at Shui Yao, who was kneeling on the ground. At this time, "Do you still dare to quibble?" Shui Yao heard Xiao Jinyan's voice. She crawled around and saluted, "Your Highness, I really don't know. I always send flowers to the Crown Princess according to your Highness's instructions, but the Crown Princess insists on saying that I put insects in the petals. There are bugs in them, and they are non-toxic, so you are wrong." Xiao Jinyan said coldly, since you think insects are not poisonous, I will give you a chance. Shui Yao nodded happily, thank you, Your Highness. Xiao Jinyan ordered in a cold voice, someone, put these non-toxic bugs on Shui Yao and let her personally verify whether the bugs are poisonous or non-poisonous. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 409. Shui Yao's smile froze on her face in an instant. She looked at the low table. She knew whether the black bugs were poisonous or not. She also knew that those bugs liked to drill into the skin. The deeper they drilled, the more painful it was. Moreover, with so many bugs, how painful would it be? Shui Yao begged for mercy, Your Highness, I am most afraid of bugs. Please spare my life. Xiao Jinyan ignored Shui Yao. After the others came in, he continued to order, take her outside and don't scare the babies. I obey your command. Qin Xiao waved his hand, and two guards dragged Shui Yao out. Qin Xiao picked up the glass bottle on the table. The poisonous bugs had all crawled into the bottle. The person he admired most was the master, and the second person he admired was the crown princess. She could make the poisonous bugs so obedient and line up to crawl into the bottle one by one. In the courtyard of the Hehuan Palace, Shui Yao was held down by the guards. Qin Xiao was annoyed when he heard Shui Yao crying. It would be bad if he disturbed the young masters. At this time, Chengzi just came back from outside, and Qin Xiao called her, Chengzi, bring a rag. Okay. Chengzi walked happily and went to the kitchen to get a dirty rag and handed it to Qin Xiao. I was going to throw this rag away, but now I have a place to use it, so I can't waste it. Chengzi makes sense. Qin Xiao laughed twice. Guard. Guard. Qin actually laughed. Wei Qi looked at his brother's silly smile and shook his head helplessly. Sure enough, love makes men mature, and they won't just stare at women. Shui Yao looked at Qin Xiao coming over with a dirty rag and shook her head desperately. Although she was a maid, she was also a high-ranking maid and had never suffered with the princess. When she thought of those poisonous little bugs and dirty rags, she couldn't stand it and burst into tears. I admit that the bug is poisonous. Can you let me go? Isn't it enough for me to admit it? It's too late. Qin Xiao took advantage of Shui Yao's crying and stuffed a rag into her mouth, blocking her ugly crying. Then he poured all the black bugs in the glass bottle on Shui Yao. Shui Yao's eyes widened, almost bloodshot, and she couldn't stop Qin Xiao's actions. Dare to hurt the crown princess and the young masters, the end is beyond your imagination. Do you think you'll be done by releasing the bug? If you want to live, tell the mastermind behind the scenes, not only can you save your life, but you can also avoid being punished. Shui Yao tried desperately to speak, not wanting to suffer, but Qin Xiao ignored her because he hadn't made Shui Yao suffer enough. Chengzi felt relieved standing aside. She snorted, you are only about my age, but you are so vicious. Dao Tao and Susu are so cute and lovable, but you can do that? You deserve it. Qin Xiao advised, Chengzi, you'd better stop watching. It will be bad if you have nightmares at night. Chengzi said angrily, she must taste the suffering of the young master and the master. Qin Xiao smiled, I know my limits. Chengzi then turned and went into the small kitchen to prepare delicious food for the master. In the bedroom, Xiao Jinyan had someone throw away the flowers. No matter how beautiful the flowers in the dream palace are, they are not worthy of entering the Hehuan palace. Shen Chuwei looked at the two little guys sitting on the couch. Sichuan was played with a look of despair. Sichuan has been dominating the palace for so long, and probably didn't expect that there would be such a day, with two little ancestors who are passionate about it. The key point is that it can't refuse or resist. Later, Sichuan watched the two little ancestors grow up and hugged it instead of grabbing its tail, legs and beard. When he thought he had survived, another little ancestor was born. Yuan Gungun never thought that the one who chased the majestic Sichuan every day would be bullied and dare not fight. Xiao Jinyan saw Sichuan being used as a pillow by Susu, and his two little hands were playing with Sichuan's tail. He said, "I found that Sichuan is only close to our family of 4. Shen Shuwei nodded in agreement. "I also found that Sichuan is actually very cute and smart." Xiao Jinyan looked at Sichuan. He always felt that Sichuan was very spiritual and easy to communicate with. It seemed that he had identified Xiaju. Apart from him, only Xiaju could get close to it. Although he had always been curious about why, it didn't seem so important now. Xiao Jinyan sat next to Xiaju and looked at the wound on her arm. If Xiaju didn't know medical skills, the consequences would be disastrous. "No matter what the price is, I will never let concubine Shui off easily. I will not let her off either. If you dare to hurt the baby, you will have to suffer first." Chen Shuwei looked at the baby and said something cruel that she had never said before. "Baby, don't worry. Whoever dares to bully you, I will not let anyone go." Xiao Jinyan put his arm around her shoulders and promised solemnly, "As long as I am here, I will not let others bully you." Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. Looking at his handsome face, he was really handsome. No wonder someone was thinking about him. Xiao Jinyan asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Shen Shuwei curved her eyebrows. "Nothing, I think the baby looks a lot like you." "Like me and you?" Xiao Jinyan looked at the two babies on the couch, and saw Susu hugging her brother's neck and biting her brother's face with her mouth. He sighed, "Why is Susu biting her brother's face?" Shen Shuwei turned her head to look at the couch, and saw Susu biting her brother's face again. Her brother blinked his beautiful little phoenix eyes twice, expressing helplessness. "Maybe you're used to it." Shen Shuwei hugged Dao Tao over. When Susu saw Mama hugging her brother, she turned to look at Baba and crawled towards Xiao Jinyan. "This is the first time I see Susu crawling." Shen Shuwei was surprised. "Susu can actually crawl. It's so amazing." Xiao Jinyan was surprised when he saw Susu crawling towards him. After Susu crawled in front of Xiao Jinyan, she reached out to him for a hug. "Father, hug me." Xiao Jinyan happily hugged Susu and saw her grinning happily. Her smile was very similar to Xiaju's, both were sweet. In fact, Dao Tao was the first to climb, but no one saw Dao Tao while she was climbing. After Susu saw her brother crawling several times, she also followed him. Shen Shuwei suddenly felt that the babies were growing up so fast. They were so small in her arms before, but now they could crawl. At this time, Qin Xiao walked in and reported, "Master, Shuiyao has confessed." Xiao Jinyan didn't expect to confess so quickly. He thought it would take some time. He ordered in a cold voice, "Send someone to capture concubine Shui, and I will interrogate her personally." "I obey my orders." Qin Xiao took the order and exited. Susu's little hands played with Xiao Jinyan's chin, and she muttered in her pink mouth, "Daddy, Daddy." Xiao Jinyan felt very satisfied and happy when he heard his daughter calling him. He gently scratched the tip of his daughter's nose and said, "Susi's mouth is so sweet as your mother-in-law." Susu was stunned for a moment when her nose was scratched, and then she grinned very happily. Seeing his daughter smiling so happily, Xiao Jinyan tried to scratch the tip of her nose with his fingers, but his daughter responded even more strongly. Susu chuckled amusedly, her beautiful eyes staring at Xiao Jinyan unblinkingly. Every time Xiao Jinyan scratched her face, Susu would grin, getting happier every time. Xiao Jinyan also laughed. Children are so playful. Shen Shuwei held her son in her arms and couldn't help laughing when she saw Xiao Jinyan playing with Susu. Kameng Palace at this time. After concubine Shui was frightened and fainted, she was carried to the bed by the maids. Snakes kept approaching and the little eunuch drove them away. Concubine Shui opened her eyes suddenly and screamed ah. The maid ran in when she heard the noise and asked worriedly, "My lord, are you okay?" Concubine Shui's face was pale, and she asked tremblingly, "Snake, there are snakes, get rid of them quickly." The maid comforted him, "Little master, the snake has been driven away, everything is fine." Concubine Shui raised her head cautiously after hearing this, looked under the bed, and breathed a sigh of relief when she found that there was no snake. "Change for me." "Here." Under the service of the maid, Concubine Shui put on her clothes. She glanced around the room, but did not see Shui Yao. "Where are the Shui Yao people?" "Little master, Shui Yao hasn't come back yet." The maid lowered her head and whispered back. "Why did it take so long?" A trace of doubt flashed in Concubine Shui's eyes. Shui Yao had always done things neatly, so it was impossible for her to stay for so long. Perhaps the crown princess asked Sister Shui Yao to do something, the maid guessed. Concubine Shui shook her head, "Impossible. Shui Yao was going to deliver flowers, and there were bugs in the flowers. If bugs crawled out and bit people, wouldn't it mean that Shui Yao was still there?" Concubine Shui walked out of Kimeng Palace with doubts. It was mid-morning, when the sun was shining. Concubine Shui started to sweat after walking for a while. Suddenly, there was a buzzing sound in my ears, and the sound became louder and louder. Concubine Shui glanced around in confusion. Before she could understand what was going on, she heard the maid shouting, "My lord, look, look over there." The slave pointed at a group of black figures not far away, showing a look of horror. Concubine Shui followed the maid's finger with confusion and saw a black shadow flying towards her. "What is that?" When the distance was close, the maid shouted, "It's a bee, it's a bee." As soon as Concubine Shui heard about the bee, she was frightened and ran back. The bees pursued her relentlessly, and soon they surrounded Concubine Shui. Go away quickly." Concubine Shui covered her face with her sleeve and waved her other hand, trying to drive away the bees. The bees saw Concubine Shui no less than they saw honey, and they swarmed over her regardless. Concubine Shui was stung everywhere by bees. "Ah! Don't bite me, go away, these beasts, go away, ah!" This was what Qin Xiao saw when he came over with his guards. Concubine Shui was being chased and bitten by a swarm of bees. This is really bad retribution. A woman with such a snake-like heart deserves to be stung by a bee. The guard asked, "Guard Qin, are you going to arrest someone now?" Qin Xiao leaned against the tree and said calmly, "What's the rush? Just wait." Guard Qin was not in a hurry, and naturally these little guards were not in a hurry either. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 410. There are so many bees that they form a black shadow. The maid and eunuch were so frightened that they ran away, not to mention helping Concubine Shui to drive away the bees. No matter where Concubine Shui hides, the bees will chase her and bite her. Qin Xiao waited until the bees had stung enough, then led his people forward, drove away the bees, and then took Concubine Shui to see his master. At this time, Concubine Shui was so frightened that she lost her soul. When Qin Xiao rescued her, she thought it was Xiao Jinyan who asked him to come. She cried with joy. "Guard Qin, call the imperial doctor over quickly. My face is covered with damn bees. How dare you sting my face?" Qin Xiao said coldly, "The imperial doctor should wait. The master wants to see Concubine Shui now and has something important to do." Even without looking in the mirror, Concubine Shui knew that her face must be disfigured and she was in a very embarrassed state. She could not go to see Xiao Jinyan in such a state of embarrassment. "I can't go to see His Highness like this. Tell His Highness that I was stung by a bee and wait until I'm done before going to see him." "That's not up to you," Qin Xiao ordered, "take her to see the master." Concubine Shui was being escorted by two guards, one on the left and the other on the right. She, a weak woman, could not struggle away. She glared at Qin Xiao. You, a little guard, dare to attack this princess. Qin Xiao snorted, why don't you dare? As long as the master just says a word, I dare to kill you now. Concubine Shui was stunned when she heard this. She was frightened. Qin Xiao didn't talk nonsense to her and took her to Hehuan Hall. Xiao Jinyan stood under the porch and looked down at concubine Shui. Her beautiful face was covered with red envelopes, her hair was messy and her clothes were disheveled. How could she look like a princess of a country? Qin Xiao stepped forward and saluted with clasped fists. Master, concubine Shui has brought you. Concubine Shui was escorted by the guards and forced to kneel on the ground. She pointed angrily at Qin Xiao and said with tears in her eyes, Your Highness, you have to make the decision for me. How dare Qin Xiao treat me like this? Xiao Jinyan looked at her like that, not hiding the disgust in his eyes. Concubine Shui, you plotted to kill my heir, and you want me to make the decision for you? I can't wait to execute you now. Concubine Shui was shocked. How could Xiao Jinyan know that he wanted to harm the crown princess's child? She pretended to be calm and retorted, Your Highness, what do you mean by saying that? How could I murder your highness's heir? Xiao Jinyan threw the confession in his hand in front of concubine Shui, see for yourself. Concubine Shui looked at the confession on the ground and picked it up doubtfully. After reading the confession, her face turned pale. Shuiyao betrayed her? This is impossible. She suddenly raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, Your Highness, this confession must be false. How could I be so vicious? Someone must have deliberately framed her. You dare to quibble when you are about to die. Xiao Jinyan stopped talking nonsense to her and shouted angrily, Come here, bring Shuiyao up. The guards escorted Shuiyao up. Concubine Shui saw Shuiyao and shouted angrily, Shuiyao, how can you slander this princess? Who gave you the courage? Shuiyao knelt on the ground tremblingly and said in a trembling voice, Princess, I don't dare to slander the princess. Concubine Shui snorted proudly, You don't even have the guts to do it. Your Highness, this slave did not slander the princess. It was indeed the princess who ordered the slave to kill the young masters. Otherwise, if I had given you 100 courages, I would not have dared to murder the emperor's heir, Shuiyao said tremblingly, her body hurting again. It's itchy, as if being bitten by countless bugs. What did you say? Concubine Shui was so angry that she slapped her twice. You, a little maid, dare to slander this princess. Who gave you the courage? Xiao Jinyan shouted angrily in a cold voice, That's enough, concubine Shui, with all the witnesses and material evidence gathered, you are still making excuses. The East Palace cannot tolerate a poisonous woman like you. A woman with a heart like a snake and a scorpion like you should be cut into pieces by 1,000 cuts. Concubine Shui was completely panicked when she heard this. Thinking of her backer, she pretended to be calm and said, Your Highness, you can't treat me like this. I am a princess of a country, and behind me is the Suiya kingdom. Xiao Jinyan interrupted her coldly, So what if you are the princess of Suiya kingdom? When you enter Daxia, you should abide by Daxia's etiquette and rules, and abide by the rules and punishments of the palace. If you dare to murder the emperor's heir, it will not be an exaggeration to kill you. Concubine Shui looked at the cold-blooded Xiao Jinyan and retorted, Your Highness, aren't the children of the crown princess okay? Why should they punish me so severely if they are okay? If your highness kills my concubine, Shuiyu kingdom will not easily spare Daxia. Papa concubine Shui's cheeks instantly swelled. Xiao Jinyan clenched his fists, and his eyes were filled with chilling coldness. You are not worthy of being a human being at all. Concubine Shui covered her face and said bitterly, I am not worthy of being a human being? What about your highness? I married into the East Palace and have never slept with you. I also want to have children and experience the joy of having children. But did your highness give me a chance? Xiao Jinyan snorted coldly, before you married into the East Palace, I told you clearly that even if you married into the East Palace, I would not like you. Since I don't like you, why would I touch you? Concubine Shui was stunned. The Queen Mother heard the prince's words as soon as she reached the door of Hehuan Hall and frowned. Wan Xian supported the Queen Mother and looked at the prince standing in the corridor. From such a distance, she could feel the cold-blooded aura emanating from his body. She looked away and said warmly, "Queen Mother, let me help you in." The Queen Mother nodded. "I didn't see Dao Tao and Susu yesterday, but the Queen Mother came today, so I didn't expect to see this scene." "The Queen Mother has arrived," as the eunuch shouted. Everyone looked over. Xiao Jinyan saw the Queen Mother coming. He stepped forward to greet her. Grandson pays respects to the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother glanced at concubine Shui, who was kneeling on the ground, and asked the prince, "What happened?" Xiao Jinyan said, replying to the Queen Mother, "Concubine Shui tried to poison the royal heir 3 times, the evidence is irrefutable, and concubine Shui arrogantly refused to admit her mistakes. The Queen Mother has lived to such an old age, and has seen too many intrigues and various means of competing for favor in the palace. She is so stupid, how could she do such a thing?" The Queen Mother looked at the prince. "Does the emperor know about this?" Xiao Jinyan said, "Grandma, my father doesn't know yet, and my grandson will inform him right away." He turned around and told Lu 11 to tell the emperor. The emperor's news came quickly from the imperial study. In the study, the emperor and the Queen Mother sat on the throne together. Xiao Jinyan told the whole story. "Father, concubine Shui is as vicious as a snake. If I hadn't noticed something was wrong, the consequences would be disastrous." When the emperor learned how concubine Shui poisoned Dao Tao and Susu, he was furious. "Concubine Shui, you are a princess of a country, how can you be so vicious? I finally had a granddaughter, but she almost died because of your jealousy. I shouldn't have agreed to your marriage. This is not a marriage, it's revenge." When concubine Shui saw that the emperor was so angry, she realized that she had really gotten into trouble this time. "Your Majesty, I was confused for a while, and I will definitely reform in the future. Please spare my life." Xiao Jinyan was afraid that the emperor would be concerned about the Suiyu kingdom, so he suggested, "Father, such a scheming and vicious person cannot be kept." Concubine Shui now clearly realized that Xiao Jinyan wanted to kill her. She was a princess after all. "Your Highness, how can you be so cold-blooded and ruthless? Aren't you afraid of angering the Suiyu kingdom?" Xiao Jinyan sneered, "Isn't it the Suiyu kingdom? Since Daxia can defeat Suiyu once, it can defeat Suiyu kingdom again. At that time, I will personally lead the army to fight. How can my great Daxia be afraid of Suiyu kingdom?" The emperor also felt that the prince's words made sense. He glared at concubine Shui. "Concubine Shui's crime of poisoning the heir is unforgivable. She will be demoted to Zhaoshan and sent to the cold palace. She is not allowed to leave the cold palace without my order." Concubine Shui immediately collapsed on the ground. For Xiao Jinyan, sending concubine Shui to the cold palace was too easy, but he didn't say anything. Once in the cold palace, he had plenty of ways to make concubine Shui live a life worse than death. This is the consequence of touching his reverse scale. Suiyan was dragged away by the guards and locked up in the cold palace. Shui Yao saw the princess being locked up in the cold palace, and she cried and begged to leave the palace. "Your Highness, I have said everything I should say. Please let me leave the palace." Shui Yao kept kowtowing. Xiao Jinyan glanced at Shui Yao. It was true that like master, like servant, he was also as vicious as a snake. "I did not promise to let you leave the palace. It is a great favor to spare your life." Shui Yao saw that she could not leave the palace, so she had to settle for the next best thing. "Then where will your Highness arrange for me to work?" Xiao Jinyan said coldly, "You were originally Princess Suiyan's personal maid. Naturally, you have to continue to serve her. Otherwise, With your vicious heart, who dares to keep you around to work? Shui Yao heard that she would have no way out if she entered the cold palace to serve the princess. She would be tortured to death if she did not die of old age. Your Highness, I don't want to go to the cold palace. Please arrange another job for her. Xiao Jinyan ignored Shui Yao. Qin Xiao, take her away. I obey your command. Qin Xiao summoned 2 guards and took Shui Yao to the cold palace. In the golden autumn of October, the weather is still a bit hot. However, the cold palace is located in a remote place, with towering trees that block the sun, making it cool and a bit eerie. The palace lanterns on both sides of the road have been in disrepair for a long time, and the palace walls are covered with green plants. Qin Xiao brought Shui Yao to the door of the cold palace and pushed Shui Yao in. Shui Yao got up from the ground, looked at the eerie and terrifying harem, and cried in fear. The guard shouted angrily, "What are you doing? Why don't you go to see your princess?" Shui Yao was driven by the guards to the palace where Shui Yan lived. It sounds like a palace, but it has been dilapidated for a long time, and spider webs can be seen everywhere. Concubine Shui vented her anger in the house and smashed the only teacup. Xiao Jinyan, how dare you do this to me? I am a princess, how dare you? My father will not let you go. At this time, the door creaked and was pushed open. Concubine Shui looked up and saw Shui Yao, her eyes full of anger. You slut, you still have the nerve to come. You two have a deep relationship as master and servant. The master specially asked Shui Yao to serve you. You don't need to thank him. You two can just reminisce about the past. Qin Xiao said and left with his people. Shui Yao looked at Shui Yan's angry eyes and subconsciously took a step back. Princess, I had no choice.